views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hello and welcome to Open BXRx, BronxNet's special coverage providing you the latest information, resources, services, and community efforts taking place locally here in the Bronx and virtually during the pandemic. I'm your host, Sonyi Lopez, and today is Tuesday, September 22nd. Coming up, the 161st Street Business Improvement District joins us to discuss updates and their recent petition against the Yankees. Stay tuned to find out what that's about. Then, the Independent Restaurants Coalition has been fighting to save restaurants struggling during the pandemic by pushing a new legislative act called the Restaurants Act 2020. We'll learn more later on. After that, we'll discuss how Destination Tomorrow provides resources and services for the LGBTQ and Black and Browns transgender and non-conforming community, even throughout the pandemic. And we'll learn more about Latinx Pitch, a kid literature event meant to raise representation in children's literature during Hispanic Heritage Month. So please, stick around. Open BXRx starts now. Welcome to Open BXRX on BronxNet. I'm your host, Sonyi Lopez, inviting you to get social with us at BronxNet TV on Instagram and Twitter, and BronxNet Community Television on Facebook. Due to the pandemic and shutdowns, businesses along 161st Street have struggled immensely. Yankee Stadium, which once brought thousands of fans to these businesses, has been closed to the public. The community now asks the Yankees to help. Joining us now to share more about a petition against the Yankees is Cary Goodman, Executive Director of the 161st Street Business Improvement District. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Goodman.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks.
Of course. So, first things first, how has the 161st Street Business Improvement District supported and provided resources for businesses along your corridor during COVID-19?
Okay, so we started just as the pandemic started, alerting our businesses to grant opportunities, loan opportunities. We continue to provide the services that we do in the district, which are basically sweeping the streets and trying to keep it a cleaner, sort of a healthier, friendlier place. But of course, the businesses have rent and they have property taxes. And as you mentioned, there are no fans there to support their economies. So we help them by trying to provide them with access to what the city had of about $50 million in grants and loans. Unfortunately, of that $50 million, not one of those dollars came to our district. And the Bronx, the overall Bronx, only got 1% of the money. So despite the fact that we had met with the Commissioner of Small Businesses and explained to him, you know, these are unique businesses. They're like what we call seasonal businesses. Like if you go somewhere for the summer, the place is bustling during the summer, like the Hamptons. And then in the off season, when people aren't going swimming in the ocean, when they're not going to Yankee Stadium for a baseball game, there's very little business to be had. So our guys had gone through already 6 months of, you know, fallow business time, nothing going on. That's the winter and the late fall for them. And then just as the spring came on, the revenues that they typically get for being open for the baseball season were first postponed and then canceled.
Right.
So they are suffering tremendously. All of our businesses are small family-owned businesses. Many of them have been there 2 or 3 generations, some going back as far as 90 years. And they make up the social fabric of what it means to go to a Yankee game. You know, when people come from Japan or California or Connecticut or even, you know, another part of the Bronx and they get to Yankee Stadium, there's a whole sort of ambiance about it where you're walking under the L, somebody says you want to buy some peanuts, there's another place you can go have a beer, over here you can get a discount on a t-shirt. There's certain joy and liveliness about being so close to the stadium. baseball lovers. So unfortunately, what's happened now is that the fact that these businesses haven't been getting the money from the fans, they're way behind in their rents, they're way behind in their property tax payments, and they're on the verge of going out of business, of extinction. Which, ordinarily, I know there are a lot of stores, a lot of businesses all over the country that are having difficulties and are closing up. Some of the biggest stores, But in this case, it's not just the stores, it's the fact that they're the sort of the heart and lungs of the neighborhood. And the neighborhood itself, well, can you think of New York without Times Square? Can you think of New York City without Greenwich Village? Shouldn't be able to think of it without Yankee Stadium and the neighborhood around it. And that's what's happening. There's a threat for it to become something other than what it's been these 9 decades. And that's why we're working so hard to help them out.
Right. And the 161st Street bid has a petition against the Yankees. Can you tell us more about it and why this petition is being pushed now?
Yeah, sure. So as the pandemic hit, we approached the Yankees and alerted them to the fact that our businesses were going to be in dire straits. And we had worked with the Yankees a few months earlier. Nike, talk about petitioning, Nike wanted to cut out all the jerseys and T-shirts and sort of sportswear that our businesses sell and make it only available inside the stadium and online to Nike. So we approached the Yankees and said, hey, these businesses are an important part of as I said, the atmosphere of the neighborhood. Would you help us try to negotiate a different deal with Nike? And they did, and we won. And so out of all the cities where there are baseball stadia and stores that sell stuff, ours are the only ones that were grandfathered or grandmothered in as a clause to be able to sell their gear. As soon as they got that approval, they bought hundreds of thousands of dollars of merchandise, but then the pandemic came a couple of weeks later and they're just sitting there. So they owe rent, they owe taxes, they owe money for inventory. The bars bought beer, the beer's already stale. The restaurants bought food. So we went to the Yankees and said, we had the successful working relationship with the Nike issue together. How about setting up a fund or doing something where you have a new lineup instead of a shortstop or a pitcher, a lineup of small businesses and community organizations that in this tragic time, the Yankees will support with grants. And you know what they came back to us with? Nothing. So we waited a few months, we talked to more businesses, we talked to more people, and we found out that in addition to the fact that the Yankees weren't giving us any money, they were getting a tremendous amount from the city itself. They were getting free fire, police, sanitation, traffic. In fact, they even have a police station in the stadium. There are no fans, so I don't know why you would need, officers in there, but they have a station in there. And they're not paying any taxes. They're not paying any property taxes. They're not paying, except for $1 a year rent. So they're getting, and as far as giving, there's almost nothing. I mean, they are required by the terms of their moving into the new stadium, which was moved onto city park land. So the Yankees agreed that every year they'd give away roughly $1 million to groups that are doing great work, different schools, the blood bank, boys and girls clubs, hunger pantries and so forth. That's wonderful. But, that was the sort of the trade-off of allowing them to move the stadium. Beyond that, they're not doing anything. They haven't contributed any money to small businesses. They haven't contributed any money to our local hospitals. So, this is a time when we felt it needed to be publicized, it needed to be brought out. We asked them a second time for money. Again, they never got back to us. We said, we've got to go public with this.
Very recently, the Yankees also gave away some paraphernalia or some clothing, some merchandise for people to go and get tested. But clearly that's not enough. What you're asking for now is for the Yankees to help the businesses along the corridor with the money that they clearly have, to help out. You've also proposed that the Yankee Stadium be used as a voting site for the upcoming elections. Can you tell us more about this idea?
Sure. Well, let me just clarify on the contributions that the Yankees are making. Nobody's saying it isn't great that they give out backpacks or that they help out with contributions. That's wonderful. That should be a part of a policy of a corporation that has $5 billion of value. But if they were to be paying their fair share of taxes, property taxes, on a stadium that's more than 1 million square feet and rent, they would be contributing to the neighborhood, to those institutions and the small businesses, $150 million at a minimum per year. And those aren't my calculations. That's by the Independent Budget Office of New York City. So you can say, yes, it's great that the Yankees are giving some money, but they are giving less than 1% of what they would be legally required to give through taxes and rent, if not for this sweetheart deal that they were able to negotiate with the former mayor. So that's a problem. And the other thing I should say, going to the voting rights issue, is that New York City owns Yankee Stadium. The Yankees don't own it, we do. So if we feel a pressing need, especially again in a time of pandemic when people are worrying, if I mail in my ballot, is it going to count? Will it get there on time? Will I get it on time? Is it going to be lost? Is it going to be, there's a lot of turmoil in people's minds about voting. Go to Yankee Stadium, drop in your ballot. That's all you got to do. They're doing it in Brooklyn with Barclays. They're doing it in Manhattan with Madison Square Garden. So you would think the Yankees would recognize, as a part of being a good corporate citizen, let's make this stadium available. We still haven't gotten approval for that.
You haven't heard back yet from the Yankees on that proposal either?
Not at all, right. You
Mr.
could say
Goodman,
we're sort of an organization in waiting. We're waiting to hear about them making a contribution. We're waiting to see if they're going to pay their taxes and their rent. And we're waiting to see if they're going to let Bronxites exercise their democratic rights by voting inside Yankee Stadium.
right. Now, can you tell us about just the importance of holding institutions such as the Yankees accountable, and why people should join causes like these in the community, especially during these tough times?
Sure. Well, first of all, let's not just pick on the Yankees. I was born in this neighborhood. I'm a Yankee fan. They're not the only ones who are bad actors in this situation, but the Mets aren't paying taxes. The Knicks aren't paying taxes. So there's a lot. In fact, if you added up all the money that the city is not collecting in taxes from corporations like the Yankees or if you go down River Avenue, you get to the mall, the Gateway Mall or Bronx Terminal Market Mall, where BJ's is and Best Buy, and it's just enormous, 149th Street. They pay no taxes either. But if you added up all those tax gifts, let's just call them, the city would have, you ready for this? $1 trillion extra. We wouldn't have to go begging to Washington for $5 billion, or I know Governor Cuomo has mentioned an even bigger number that the state needs. No, if we just took care of our own tax responsibilities and didn't make it sort of a sweetheart deal for these huge corporations to take advantage of, we could handle all the economic needs of the neighborhood. So it's really important for people to come to the rally, to sign a petition, to get engaged so they can have a framework or a landscape to look at this terrible pandemic from. It's not just a virus, it's an economic virus, it's an unemployment virus, and it can be traced to the tax policies that we have established in the city over the last few decades.
Right.
Not even only de Blasio's fault. There's a whole history of mayors making concessions to big corporations. The Amazon deal that luckily fell apart at one point out in Queens, where they wanted to put in their second national headquarters. And that was the birth of Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's campaign and her success as a community leader, because she saw through the idea of using money to build a helipad for the world's second or third, or maybe he's the first richest person in the world, while the people in the projects across the street, were suffering from lack of heat and unemployment and a whole host of, bad numbers.
Right. And then those things are now affecting this area during COVID-19. You know, the health issues that people face with Asthma Alley here in Mott Haven. You know, the fact that the headquarters is now here, another headquarters of Amazon down the block. So again, Mr. Goodman, thank you for your time today. Unfortunately, this is going to be airing after the protest that's taking place Thursday. However, there is a petition available online if you're interested in learning more. How can people find out more about the petition?
Sure. Just go to change.org and click Defund the Yankees.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Goodman, for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you. And hopefully when people see this, they'll be celebrating because Thursday will have been such a huge success.
Yes, we'll be sure to air the protest on BronxNet as well as soon as we get there. We will be there to support. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Sonyi.
We'll be right back with Open BXRx.
After closing in the middle of March due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the New York Public Library opened several branches in the Bronx, Manhattan, and Staten Island. And with remote learning starting, this might be a great way for parents to utilize those resources to help their children learn from home.
I think the library has traditionally been an underutilized resource. I think the fact that it is opening could be a huge benefit for parents.
42% of students opted to participate in remote learning. However, some residents believe this might not be beneficial for students.
It's actually suffocating kids because they're not getting the same experiences to the world. Like essentially, like if that kid grew up maybe 5 years from now, that person's not going to hop on a train and come to New York City just for no reason because they've been sheltered the entire time.
But for kids and parents who decide to make the trip to the library, these branches offer contactless service. Customers can pick up items they check out online or over the phone, and they must wear face masks and socially distance when they come in. And while homes do not offer the same setting as a classroom, some New Yorkers tell us the items found at the library might help children with remote learning.
I think it's a great interim solution. I think what's hard is that some kids are maybe physical or visual learners. They need to be in the classroom.
All returned items will be quarantined for 96 hours before they are placed back on the floor. City Island, Castle Hill, Baychester, and Kingsbridge libraries are just a few of the locations opened here in the Bronx. Some residents remain skeptical the library will provide a good solution for children as they participate in remote learning.
It's not going to help anybody because we didn't use that at all. People just went to the library to like rent movies or books. No one went to actually study. You'd see some people like sitting down, like doing the thing, but like no one's really in I'm not like, yo, bro, meet me at the library. When I was like 11, I skateboarded, maybe, yeah, but like now, you think your parents gonna take your child with you to the library? And that's not happening at all.
And if you're still on the fence about coming in to snag a good read, the New York Public Library says that customers who checked out items before their temporary close and during the first phase of reopening do not have to worry about accruing temporary fines. Reporting for BronxNet, Jericho Tran.
Welcome back. According to Yelp, nearly 160,000 restaurants have closed permanently due to the pandemic. In an effort to help aid those businesses impacted by this crisis, the Independent Restaurants Coalition has been fighting for Congress to push the Restaurants Act of 2020. Joining us now to discuss is Will Guidara, founding member of the Independent Restaurants Coalition. Will, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. First things first, for those who are not familiar, please tell us about the Independent Restaurant Coalition and your mission.
So the IRC, as we've come to call it, started right at the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis with a few phone calls between some different restaurateurs acknowledging that this was going to be particularly tough on our industry. And while we've had, as an industry, the restaurant business has had the NRA, the National Restaurant Association, lobbying on our behalf, we came together to lobby on behalf of independent restaurants specifically. And what started as a few people on a Zoom call has turned into a coalition of people representing 500,000 restaurants across the country, 11 million people that work in those restaurants. And we're just trying to do whatever we can to bring awareness to our specific situation and try to encourage people in DC to give us the relief we need to get through this.
Right. And as we know, Will, restaurants have taken a huge hit during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now outdoor dining is coming back here in New York City. However, there has been indoor dining is coming back here in New York City. However, there has been outdoor dining for some places. Yet that still hasn't helped a lot of restaurants. As you say, you represent independent restaurants. What is the difference between those smaller restaurants, the independent restaurants, and other restaurants?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of independent restaurants out there who just simply don't have the corporate backing that results in enough cash on hand to suffer through a time like this where revenue is so dramatically decreased. I mean, you look at New York City. Okay, so we've had takeout and delivery, and depending on where you're located, perhaps there's some good patio seating opportunities. And now, September 30th, we're coming back with 25% capacity. But the reality is you can't afford to operate at 25% or in other parts at 50% capacity when we still have to cover 100% of our overhead. And so we're just in a really, really challenging place where, listen, everyone that I talk to understands that we need to be responsible. And opening at 100% right now maybe doesn't make sense, but we can't have our industry be the most impacted by this crisis and while endeavoring to be responsible, not receive some relief to offset the challenging situation that we're in.
Right. And Will, when we talk about the impacts that restaurants have made in employment opportunities as well in the industry and the economy, can you just give us a little bit of background on that as well?
Oh, for sure. I mean, okay, the restaurant industry nationwide is a $760 billion powerhouse in the US economy. I mean, it comprises 3.5% of the entire GDP. Independent restaurants specifically employ 11 million workers directly, but we support the livelihoods of over 5 million others through the supply chains, whether we're talking about the farmer, the producers, the winemakers. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. It's a key driver of economic opportunity. We employ more employee managers from marginalized communities in our industry than any other industry. We employ 1 million single mothers. Nearly 40% of restaurant workers are between 16 and 24. And these are jobs for so many people that if some relief isn't given to our industry, it's going to take a really long time for them to come back.
Right. Thank you, Will, for sharing. Let's discuss the current state of the restaurant industry. Thousands of restaurants have closed due to the pandemic, and many more are at risk. As I said in the beginning, most recently, a Yelp study said that 60% of those restaurants are gone for good. They won't be coming back post-pandemic. The IRC recently stated that restaurants have been the hardest hit industry during COVID-19. Can you share more about the impact this pandemic has had on restaurants?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense why we're hit the hardest, right? We rely almost exclusively on people coming together in person. And we heard even when it was said, the CDC not too long ago said that, I mean, restaurants, you need to take your mask off to eat, right? And so just situationally, we're in a position that is least beneficial to handle something like what's going on. But yeah, I mean, the reality is this is not a time when there's a lot of money out there to help people bridge the gap until when revenue returns to normal. I mean, our industry is already down 2.5 million jobs since the outset of the pandemic, meaning that 1 of 4 jobs lost from this entire thing has come from restaurants and bars. I think we're on pace to lose as an industry something like $240 billion in revenue this year. Which won't only result in a ton of restaurants closing, but the ripple effect, as I said before, to the farms, the wineries, the manufacturers, transportation. I don't think people have fully kind of grabbed onto how damaging this will ultimately be if something doesn't change.
Right. Now, Will, in order to continue fighting to save independent restaurants, your coalition has been pushing the Restaurants Act 2020. Can you tell us more about this act, what it is, and who it will help?
Yeah. Okay, so we came up with this, and we've been talking about this for months. I mean, the PPP program was available to everyone out there, and it was a helpful part of restaurants getting through this. Although 2 things: 1, a lot of smaller operations were unable to get a PPP loan because they didn't have a close banking relationship, and 2, most of the people that did get those loans, they're running out right now. The Restaurants Act is an industry-specific bipartisan bill. It was introduced in June by the Mississippi Republican Senator Roger Wicker, the Oregon Democratic Representative Earl Blumenauer, and it puts aside a $120 billion revitalization fund for small restaurants and be managed by the Treasury. The grants would be available to any small business, which means that you can't have more than 20 of the same operations. So you can't have a big chain of restaurants. It would be specifically for people that own less than 20 of a single thing. And the idea is for the first 2 weeks, grants would be prioritized for women, veteran, minority-owned and operated businesses with smaller revenues so that we don't make the same mistake that's been made in the past where some people don't have access to the grants while the big companies scoop them all up. The idea of it is we think of it, listen, one of the things that people say about restaurants is that the margins are low, that 90 to 95 cents of every dollar goes right out the door. I think that's one of the reasons why we should be saving restaurants, because it doesn't just help restaurants. It helps all the businesses and the millions of workers up and down the supply chain that benefit from restaurants. In fact, when we introduced the bill, over 215 small businesses not in the restaurant industry sent a letter to Congress endorsing the act.
Wow. And now, Will, what legislative level is the Restaurants Act in now? Do you believe that this act can be passed in time to save struggling restaurants?
You know, we've received a ton of support and a ton of co-sponsors. In the last few days alone, 12 new senators have signed on, including Democrats, a Republican, and an independent. And I mean, I think right now at this moment, we have 40 senators co-sponsoring the act, 195 representatives co-sponsoring it. And so we have momentum. And listen, I wish this had been passed a month ago because a lot of places that have closed wouldn't have had to. And it's tragic when you think about the loss, not only economically, but culturally to our towns and our cities that, I mean, restaurants are the central gathering places for these towns and cities. That said, it's not too late. It just needs to happen soon. Because every day that passes where people out there running restaurants don't have some sort of understanding of what's coming next, more and more and more people are going to be throwing in the towel. And those are decisions that cannot be unmade.
And how can people learn more about the Independent Restaurant Coalition, the Restaurants Act, and why should they support today?
Well, everyone is welcome to join the movement. Just go to saverestaurants.com. You can sign up. We'll keep you abreast of everything we're working on. We'll cue you in and tell you where you can help. And why? I mean, I guess everything I've been saying, if you want to protect millions of jobs, if you want to help sustain the contributions that restaurants have on the economy, but perhaps more than ever before, I'd like to think I've been a restaurateur my entire life. It's the only thing I've ever done. We're in the business of serving others. We get out of bed so excited to help people celebrate one of the most magical moments of their lives, or sometimes even give them the grace to forget the difficult moments of their lives. We've always endeavored to say yes, and right now we need others to serve us so that we can continue waking up and serving you in return.
Thank you so much, Will, for your time today, and I hope that everything turns out well. We have your support as well. We will be posting this on our webpage everywhere to get the word across about this incredible act that may save many restaurants in need during these tough times.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Again, folks, to learn about the Save Restaurants Act 2020, you can visit saverestaurants.com, follow Independent Restaurants on Restaurants Coalition on Facebook, follow on Instagram and Twitter at INDP Restaurants. We'll be right back.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption
of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting to the new reality.
Reporting from BXRx.
It looks bleak. It feels bleak. But the city isn't shut down because our public services keep working. In spite of, and in the face of, the dangers, we can count on them. And to keep them working and funded, now and in the future, we need to be counted. Self-respond now to the 2020 census at my2020census.gov.
Who's most at risk for coronavirus? People over 65, people with underlying medical conditions like heart disease, chronic lung disease, asthma, diabetes, people undergoing cancer treatment, and people with weakened immune systems. What should you do if you or a loved one is at higher risk? Avoid close contact with people. Avoid crowds. Stay home if you can. Wash your hands frequently. Learn more ways to protect yourself and others at coronavirus.gov.
Why should young people care about the spread of coronavirus? Well, we know that people with underlying medical conditions over the age of 60 are at highest risk, but they've got to get it from somebody.
So we're asking everyone to be selfless for others so that we can protect those who are most susceptible.
Not going to bars, not going to restaurants. It all just means physical separation so that you have a space between you and others.
For more information on how you can social distance, please go to coronavirus.gov.
Welcome back. The Human Rights Campaign reports that 2020 has already seen at least 21 transgender or gender nonconforming people fatally shot or killed by other violent means, fueling Black Trans Lives Matter movements during these times of civil unrest. Joining us now to discuss more about this and resources for the trans community here in the Bronx is Asia Lyons, Project Manager at Destination Tomorrow. Asia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Of course. So for those who are not familiar, can you tell us more about Destination Tomorrow and your mission?
Sure. So Destination Tomorrow is the only LGBT center in the Bronx. So we provide services to LGBT folks and we don't turn anyone away. So of course, we're located in the South Bronx, and we believe that no one should have to leave their neighborhood to access LGBTQ specific services. It is our belief that regardless of your sexual orientation or gender expression or gender identity, everyone has a space and deserves a space to call their own. And our mission is driven around economic empowerment, right? So we want to make sure that our community focuses on their educational goals, their practical life skills, right? And leading, making sure that we give them the emergency treatment, housing, healthcare services that they need in order to have a healthy and balanced life.
Thank you, Asia. And what types of services and support does Destination Tomorrow provide to LGBTQ+ and Black and Brown transgender and nonconforming communities? Also, how has the pandemic changed your operations?
Yeah, so we offer GED services. We offer individual counseling, support groups. We also have a transgender impact fund specifically for COVID. So those trans-led organizations that are in need to serve the community all throughout the U.S. that need funding, they can reach out to us and apply for that funding via our website. And we also have a Transcend Community Impact Fund, which is an annual type of grant that trans-led organizations can apply for to serve the trans community all throughout the US. And the way that COVID-19 has impacted our organization is that we prioritize, the health of Destination Tomorrow staff and clients. As a result, all our programming is limited by appointments only to reduce the spread of COVID-19.
Thank you so much for sharing, Asia. So now things, of course, are not happening at the office. People have to call in the number if they need services.
That's right.
Right. And something else that you're doing virtually is also, I wanted to discuss the girls group. It's a virtual discussion that you lead for cis and trans women. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so it's a wonderful addition to our programming. So the girls group is where trans and cis women come together with the intention of creating a sisterhood, right? I think oftentimes people believe that, cis and trans women cannot be in the same place because people believe that we don't have the same issues. Some issues may not be the same, but there are things that really connect us and unite us. And some of the things that we talk about are experiences such as sexism, relationship issues, racism, transphobia, catcalling, right, domestic violence, and more. And I can't tell you how often women and trans women, when they come together, we talk about the violence that we experience and how shocking it can be that, yeah, we do experience similar forms of violence. Some of us experience it more than others. And it's really important to have this type of programming to provide support, especially during the pandemic, especially when the violence against trans people are increasing at a rapid rate.
Yes. And Asia, for anyone listening right now, how can people join the conversations that happen during girls group?
So when they call us, they can schedule an intake with myself or my colleague Nia, and we'll do an intake to see if they're a good fit for the group, right? Because we want people to come in with good intentions. We want people to respect the privacy and confidentiality of the group as we talk about very heavy topics. And they are just full of passion, and it's so good to see all of us come together to find some peace, solidarity, and create safety and sisterhood.
All right, thank you, Aisha. And what's that number, just so we can put it up on the screen?
Yes, so the number is 646-723-3325. And you can also email us at info@destinationtomorrow.org.
Thank you, Asia. And as we stated in the beginning, violence against trans lives in our community has taken the lives of countless trans women. Most recently, Tiffany Harris here in the Bronx. Tiffany is reported to have been the 24th violent death of a transgender or gender non-conforming person this year in the United States. And this is not counting so many others who may have not been reported or misreported. Please talk to us about the uptick in violence against the transgender community and issues of misreporting and erasure in the community.
Yeah, so one of the biggest contributions to the rise in trans-related violence is that trans people are more visible for about the past decade, right? So people are not having meaningful conversations and dialogue in with the trans community. So in fact, many people do not know a trans person, and a lot of folks do not care to know us. So that just adds to the beliefs and stereotypes people have of us. In addition, people who have experienced violence don't feel comfortable reporting violence to the police because they feel that police will not protect them. And lastly, our current political climate has contributed to the violence against trans women. So we see the president and his administration making decisions that negatively impact trans people, which sends a message that trans people are not worthy to protect and that it's okay to harm us. I mean, you could look at the death of Tiffany Harris, right? At first, the police were unable to identify who she was, right? And inaccurately misgendered her. So these are the things that trans people generally face. So a lot of the violence or even murders are underreported because of the misgendering.
And Asia, can you also help us understand more of the challenges that the trans community faces, especially during COVID-19, during the pandemic?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. So trans people are disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. So many have not been employed and do not qualify for unemployment. Many are experiencing food insecurities. Access to healthcare has been lacking. And many trans people with COVID-19 symptoms have not accessed healthcare due to fear of discrimination. And we also have lost transgender people due to COVID.
And now, of course, I really define the trans women of color helped start the fight for LGBTQ liberation. And today, during the Black Lives Matter movements, people are holding space and highlighting the vulnerable trans community through the Black Trans Lives Matter movement. Can you help us understand the importance of solidarity and visibility during these times of civil unrest?
Yeah, I do want to respond to that in a different way, right? I think that when you ask Black trans women if they feel supported by the Black Lives Matter movement around the area of trans-related murders, they will tell you that they do not feel supported. Many Black trans women are being murdered by the hands of Black men, and they would like to see Black Lives Matter stand in solidarity with Black trans women to address this issue. Trans people are fearful of going outside and facing the world due to the risk of violence, right? Many of my Black trans sisters want to go to protests with the Black Lives Matter movement, and they're afraid. They're afraid that they may be attacked. And you can just look at the many forms of violence they experience on social media. You know, the violence is usually brutal, and nobody wants to experience that. People want to feel safe no matter where they go.
Right. Asia, how can we change this in our communities today? I know that DT provides a lot of resources and information for people who, you know, want to engage and also support trans lives. How can we all make a better place and a better world for the transgender community?
Yeah, I think that if you're in a position of leadership, right, or that you want to make a difference in the community, you are about anti-violence, across the board, then I would say come join us. Join us in this battle for trans liberation, for trans safety. You know, because, you know, when we address, you know, trans-related violence, we address all forms of violence. And I think that, you know, our communities deserve it.
And one final thing before we go, how can people get in touch with Destination Tomorrow, stay connected online, and support you during these tough times?
Yeah, so we are on many social media platforms, including Facebook, Instagram. You can search Destination Tomorrow, and you can find us. You can also contact us at 646-723-3325, or email us at info@destinationtomorrow.org.
Thank you so much, Asia, for your time today, and thank you for all the work that you're doing within our community.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Folks, again, you can stay in touch with Destination Tomorrow by calling them at 646-723-3325. You can also visit their website at destinationtomorrow.org and follow them on Instagram at Destination Tomorrow 452, Facebook at Destination Tomorrow, and Twitter at Dest2Morrow. We'll be right back.
Mario's restaurant is just one of several here in the Bronx's Little Italy section, getting ready for indoor dining. This following the governor's announcement to allow 25% capacity beginning September 30th, with certain restrictions to block the spread of COVID-19.
The rules will be temperature checks for anyone who comes in at the door. one member of each party has to leave information, phone number, email, so that there's contact tracing information if there is an outbreak.
It helps us survive because survival is a big part of this now.
Inside Mario's on Arthur Avenue, it looks almost empty, but tables and chairs have been set up in a way the state is now requiring.
With the little bit outside, we're having trouble. We're struggling just to, pay the bills and pay our help and take people back.
It's not only a step in the right direction for Mario's.
Dominic's has been around since 1962.
That was on August 7th when Charlie, owner of Dominic's back then, called on the mayor and governor to develop a comprehensive reopening plan for restaurants in New York City before the holidays.
If we're not ready to open up, not full, but pretty much they lift the outside and let us go inside for the holidays, we got big problems.
Weeks later, Delfino is echoing those thoughts as well, even as indoor dining is slated to open at the end of the month.
Keeping it closed is not good. People, even for ourselves, for your own sanity, staying home is not good for your mental health.
And now finally, things have turned in their direction.
People have even said to us, we're so glad you're open because we need to get out. We need to try to have some normal things back in our life. And one of those normal things is going out to eat with your friends or your loved one or your mother.
Restaurants will have the air filtration requirement, the enhanced air filtration requirement that is specified in the state guidance. There'll be limited air recirculation. We want air from the outside to provide additional ventilation.
So many here are thrilled with the governor's plan. They say it not only is going to be great for the customers, but also it helps to build their staff. And that's something really important to business owners here. Here in Belmont, Arlene Makoko for BronxNet.
Welcome back. The diversity movement in literature is nothing new. Readers and writers have advocated for making space for marginalized voices in literature, ensuring that every reader sees themselves represented in books. Joining us now to discuss Latinx Pitch are Mariana Llanos, co-founder of Latinx Pitch, and Jorge Lacera, author and illustrator at Studio Lacera. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
So first, for those who are not familiar, Mariana, can you give us some background on Latinx Pitch and your mission there?
Yes, so we are a group of authors and illustrators from, who live in the United States, but are from diverse communities. I'm Peruvian, for example. And we got together because we wanted to boost representation. We write children's literature, we illustrate children's literature. And we thought that we needed to take the bull by its horns, like we say in Spanish, el toro por las astas, and say, hey, we're here. So, yes.
Thank you for the background. And Jorge, why was it important for you as an illustrator to join this cause as well?
Well, I think it's important for all Latinx voices to be represented as much as possible. And that's also, that speaks to illustration as well as writing. I think it's awesome when we can get writers and illustrators together to share our different backgrounds. So that's important.
What are some of the challenges that Latino and Latina writers face in the publishing world, for instance?
I think some of the challenges, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mariana.
Okay, so, well, what I think is that we hear all the time that our stories are needed, that children want to see themselves in stories. We see that, but when time comes, we hear that children won't relate to this, or children won't read stories set in other countries, or we are told that we're different, and that doesn't sell. And so we want to prove them wrong, so yeah, we do a lot of things that are different, perhaps, of the preconception, but in essence, we're all the same.
And you have your daughter there. I would like to hear what Alana thinks about that. How do you feel about representation in books that have characters that look and speak like you?
Well, I really like reading books that like have a lot of imagination and like show kids how to use their imagination and how to explore different parts of themselves.
Right. And you like books that have words in Spanish as well, or some?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. So can you each tell us about the types of books that you write and the importance of the representation and language accessibility? Mariana, you just mentioned that as well.
Yes, well, I'll go ahead. But yes, well, I write all kinds of stories. You know, that's one thing that we Latino people, Latinx people, we don't have one type of story. We have many stories, and we write in different genres too. So, but the most common for me, at least, is to write with my heart. You know, there's a lot of heart on my stories, and I use Spanish. Or sometimes I write bilingual stories. I write them in English, and then I rewrite my story in Spanish. So I like using both languages and using part of my own life in the story, because I think that kids like that. They like something that is authentic.
And for you, Jorge?
Yeah, for me, the types of stories, as Mariana said, there's a lot of stories to tell in a lot of different ways. For me, what's important for representation is to show stories that show the Latino community in the United States as, much more than just stories that deal with, immigration or poverty. These are major issues that our community deals with, and those books are really important. But, our book that I co-wrote with my wife, Megan Lacera, and I also illustrated, is called Zombies Don't Eat Veggies. It's about a mixed family that speaks Spanish in the household, but they happen to be zombies. And it's a fun story. There's lots of humor and puns in it. And I think that's sort of the kind of stories that I think are also important to have out to represent in the community.
I love that. And so on last week, actually, September 15th, you held an event called Latinx Pitch. And this took place all day on Twitter. Mariana, can you give us more information about that?
Well, Latinx Pitch was our effort to bring our writing community together. And like I said, to show that we are here. Actually, our event started because we read a quote by someone who said that there are not enough Latinx writers. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to prove that wrong as well. We are here, we are writing. And so that was the response. And we've had many people participating with great stories in all genres. Even we writers who have agents like myself and Jorge, and other writers in our group who have agents are participating, and other writers who do not have agents are participating too. So we wanted to make it inclusive. We don't want to make something elitist that only a few people can participate. No, we want everybody to be there. We wanted everybody to be there, and we did it. We did it actually, and there were lots of editors and agents hungry for our stories.
Right. And now that we're all living in this virtual realm, they have more access to connecting with other people across the nation. Also, like, more people can join in since it's virtually through Twitter that they can pitch these stories and hopefully gain some exposure. Since you said there are plenty of Latinx writers out there, as opposed to what that quote said, no? I also wanted to ask just about a quote that you said, Mariana, in the past, about writers becoming travel agents for children through writing. Can you tell us a little bit more about what this means?
Of course, when I visit schools with this book, it's called Kutu, the Tiny Inca Princess, and it takes children to the Inca Empire 500 years ago. So I like to tell kids in those visits that books are also time machines. So we as writers have that ability to be travel agents. We can make children travel in time. We can make them travel to other cultures, other countries, especially in times like this, right? Where we can't barely leave our house, or in any other times that it's so hard to travel. So we have the responsibility to show children the world and to show them that the world is bigger than they think. And when you see things that are different, that you think are different, you realize that you have more in common than you think.
That is
absolutely. Yeah, I think that also telling your own story allows children particularly it fuels their imagination. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about the Latinx community in the United States and in the world, is that we come from so many different diverse backgrounds that it also creates an opportunity for kids to expand that sort of imagination of what the world is like.
Absolutely. And Alana, I wanted to ask you, what have books meant to you during these times? We've been in quarantine for so long. Have you felt like happy reading books during this time? Have they helped you through these times?
Yeah, because I like to explore my imagination a lot in books and to see different parts of me that can see the world. And I can travel back in time too.
I love that. And you have your mom right there. You know, she's an author, so you can just grab a book and read it whenever, right? That's such a right there.
And we do lots of trips to the library as well, you know, so we come back with stacks of books. So yeah, that's super fun always.
Yes, and both of your books are like for la familia, right? Para la familia is family oriented, so people can read it together with their children and their families. So I think they're both very wonderful books. Where can people find out more about each of your books and perhaps purchase them and support you as well during these times?
Well, they can find my books on everywhere they find books, you know, on Amazon, on bookshop.org. Or they can go to my website, marianallanos.com, but find us on Twitter too, and you know, and we're there, and we love interacting with teachers, parents, and everybody who wants a little bit more than just the book, and they want also a little bit of background of the story and all that.
Yeah, and you can find out more about Zombies Don't Eat Veggies at our website, which is studiolacera.com, and we have links to where you can purchase the book there. The book is also available on Storyline Online. Jaime Camille did a wonderful reading of it in both English and Spanish, and it comes with resources for teachers and educators. And we also have a song, Zombies Don't Eat Veggies song, that you can find also on our website.
Amazing. And one more thing, before schools open up, I know that it's also important to diversify our reading selections and the literary realm in schools. Can you talk a little bit more about that? The fact that schools can also integrate more culturally relevant stories into their literature.
Yes, we hope to inspire librarians and teachers to find more books by Latinx writers. They can, you know, if they need to do this, they can go on Twitter. There are many teachers on Twitter and follow, like I said, Latinx Pitch. And so they can have an idea of what authors to find and where to find it. But I think it's so important that we incorporate our culture, not only during Hispanic Heritage Month or Latinx Heritage Month, but all throughout the year. And actually, I wanted to speak about the Congressional Hispanic Caucus that is doing a great job in Congress, bringing up the issue of representation for in movies, in publishing, in all of these industries. So it is teamwork. It is teamwork. It's not only about us writers writing Latino stories. It's or publishers publishing Latino stories. It's also about teachers requesting these books, about librarians requesting these books, and about parents supporting the people who are creating this kind of works for you.
Thank you so much, Mariana, Jorge. Thank you for joining us today, and Alana, of course, as well. Before we go, how can people learn more and join the cause at Latinx Pitch? And please leave us with a message to Latinx writers and aspiring young writers.
Go ahead, Jorge.
So you can find us on Twitter at Latinx Pitch, and you can also check out the event and all the wonderful book deals and agents that we're reaching out at hashtag Latinx Pitch, so LATINXPITCH. And in terms of messaging, I would say keep writing, keep drawing. The world needs your stories, so please don't stop and there's a community of folks out here who are excited and eager to hear what you have to say.
Thank you both again for your time, and what a wonderful way to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, folks, you can visit and follow at Latinx Pitch on Instagram and Twitter, and visit their website at latinxpitch.wordpress.com. That's all for our show today. Thank you for tuning in to BXRx. I'm your host, Sonyi Lopez, wishing you and your family safety and wellness now and always.